Hey there, thanks for selecting our session. My name is Jessica Stack, and with me today is Logan Guffey, and we're going to be talking about Evansville Water and Sewer Utilities Initiative to move to a asset management strategy for their wastewater treatment plants. And Logan, I'll let you go ahead and take it away for introductions.
Yeah, thanks. Like Jess said, my name's Logan Guffey. The facility asset manager for the Evansville Water and Sewer Utility in Evansville, Indiana. Few pictures of myself and wife and family. Been married for 4 years, and as of this recording, we're expecting our first kid any day. And so if I get up and walk out in this recording, that's the reason. Born and raised here in Evansville. We've got 2 local universities here in town, and I've got a degree from each one. So I'm a townie through and through, but happy to be here and happy to present today.
Awesome. Okay. Don't want to cut you off too soon or anything.
Yeah.
So again, my name is Jessica Stack. I'm a senior consultant with Power Engineers. I have been with Power since 2012 and in Cityworks Consulting since roughly 2010, 2011 or so. You just enjoy being outside. I have 2 beautiful little girls, so I have absolutely no pictures of anything other than them on any camera roll ever that exists ever. So everything is just them all the time. They were super fun. So we, enjoy trips to the beach, and we play tennis, and whenever we go to Grandma and Grandpa's house, we always like to fish in the pond in their backyard there. So our eldest caught her first fish just a few months ago, so that was pretty exciting. And just enjoying time with one another. So what we will go over, just kind of a presentation outline for you. Logan is going to go ahead and discuss some of the project background and general Evansville interesting facts and goings on and things like that. And then I'll get into the technical aspects of the implementation and do a little live demonstration. Then we'll move to next steps, and then we'll wrap up. So Logan, if you want to go ahead and take it away.
Yeah,
just let me know when to flip slides for you.
All right. Yeah, just to give a little bit of a background on Evansville and the utility in general. So the Evansville Water Works as a department has actually been around since the late 1870s. And the picture of the plant that you see there is actually from 1897. And that building actually still exists on our current plant. So we've got some construction elements still active from that original 1897 plant. Serve about 65,000 accounts, roughly 200,000 in population served. And we've got about 1,000 miles of pipe going both directions. So going out in our distribution network and then coming back in collections. So Jess, if you want to move on to the next slide, what we're probably better known for is Evansville, Indiana is home to one of the largest street fairs in the United States. We've got our annual fall festival on the west side of Evansville, and this year will be the 100th fall festival. It should have been last year, but had to cancel due to COVID. We routinely get a few 100,000 folks every night for about a week straight, full of fried foods and rides. And so that is probably one of the more marketable aspects of Evansville other than our water utility. Jess, if you want to go ahead and move on, probably to get a little bit better of a background of the project. We've been working with our water utility and specifically the water treatment plant to implement Cityworks from a preventative maintenance perspective. This plant being as old as it is in continual operation, their preventative maintenance program, like many others, is hard copies in filing cabinets that many people don't ever go back and reference. So we're working with them, working with the maintenance team to move their preventative maintenance, weekly, monthly inspections into the digital world and into Cityworks in particular.
Great. All right, so now I'll go ahead and get into the technical aspects of the implementation. And our implementation was purely inspections, Cityworks inspections for the treatment plant. And there's two types of inspections in Cityworks. And for those that may or may not have used one or both, it's just important to kind of lay out the differences there initially. So I'll go over those first before I dive into any of the implementation components. So Cityworks, you have the option for a linear inspection and a branching inspection. A linear inspection is essentially your form. It's a list of all of the questions, observations that you need to check for in your inspection, and it has all of the possible answers all right there, all on one form. So if you are already using a paper form, it's very easy to reproduce that form in a linear format. It's basically the same thing, just digital at that point. And then your branching inspection, I kind of like to describe it as one of those determine the ending stories. So if you go down one path, then you defeat the dragon. And if you go down the other, then you save the princess or something, you know, but the overarching thing is that you determine the next step basically in the story, and that's essentially what the branching inspection is as well. The observation that is presented to you is directly related to the answer you've just selected from the previous. So, and again, we'll go over all of this. I can show you some of this, but that's just an important thing to note between the two, because we did actually implement both, and they do have distinct use cases, I would say. So some preventative maintenance inspections that we did by plant, building, or area. So like your main office area or filter building, filter bed, things like that. Different chemical buildings and stuff. And within each of those buildings or each of those areas, there's different components that get inspected. And so we use the inspection panels to kind of organize all of these observations so that anything dealing with chemical systems is all in one place, and anything dealing with air handlers is all in one place. So it's all in one nice little form. And we were able to include things like your safety measures, and as well as instructions for each of the observations, which is kind of nice because especially in a linear format, like I mentioned, you see the whole form, all the observations, all of your answers for the whole inspection. So there's really no getting around the, oh, I didn't see the safety precaution I was supposed to take. You know, it's all right there in the inspection, and you have to read it. You see, it's at least presented to you before you get to the observation. So that was intentional. That was thought out for sure. And with those linear inspections, we also made them a cyclical nature. So either every week or every month, a new inspection would come up. And the thing with the cyclical inspection is that the projected start date of the inspection is where the future date is captured, but that inspection record that's supposed to take place in the future is created right when you hit save in that parent inspection. So if you're doing cyclical inspections, the system is not waiting 2 weeks from now to create the record. It's creating it now. It's just setting a projected start date of 2 weeks from now, which is handy because then we can extract that and put it in a separate save search, which is essentially what we did. So we were able to pull out those records that are supposed to take place 2 weeks from now and keep those in a separate panel or separate inbox so that the manager can go in and kind of see what's coming up. And then we made it so that the mobile side, which is what the inspectors were using, the folks in the field are using, only presented the active inspections for that week. So we're able to keep them separate. So even though it's already technically there, we're still keeping them separated. And the mobile piece was important to note here as well, because there's really poor connectivity at the plant. And so the ability to work in that disconnected environment was definitely key for this deployment.
Yeah, and just to jump in and add a quick note to that, the implementation measure that we used with our maintenance crew, in particular with that mobile environment, we distributed iPads with cellular LTE connectivity. That way they don't have to rely on staying on a Wi-Fi signal, because like many other plants, all the concrete around signal is fairly poor in certain locations. And so they're using that cellular iPad so that they can work in a disconnected environment.
Cool. Good deal. And then on the branching inspection side, that was driven by the work management program that was in place at the plant. So Assethound was what was already being used, and we needed to essentially reproduce what was being done in Assethound. So we didn't want to change, the guys were already having to go from Assethound to Cityworks, so that was really all we wanted to change. We didn't want to change how they're entering information or anything like that. The only step was to, if at all possible, improve upon or make easier what they were already doing. So we just reproduced what Assethound was already presenting. And the way Assethound works is by these hierarchies. So they were already used to selecting an asset essentially in this manner. So in Assethound, you have to select your utility first, which is always EWSU, then division, which is administrative, sewer, or water. Then you come to facility, and facility will depend upon which division you've selected. So facility under sewer, for example, is CSO storage, east and west treatment plant, and lift station. And then the area from there will depend upon what facility you've selected. So it creates like this pyramid essentially, where the bottom is the actual asset. So you get finer and finer and finer until you reach what that actual asset is. And that was one of the reasons that branching inspection was so handy. So here is how that branching inspection looks in mobile. Doesn't do it justice. This is very difficult to kind of demonstrate mobile in this setting with the way VPN is set up and stuff. So unfortunately, we can't demonstrate that here. There might be a chance to do it on a one-on-one basis at some point. If anyone was interested in seeing that potentially, we could see what we can do there. But in this setting, it's just a little difficult to demonstrate. So we had to stick with screenshots here. But the way mobile works with branching inspections is it's kind of stacking the observations you've answered on top of one another beneath the currently active observation. So that's kind of what you're seeing here on the top right is the next observation in the branch series. And what you're seeing there at the bottom of that right-hand screenshot is what's been answered already. The branching in mobile still allows you to go backwards and change a previous response if you need to. So whatever's present in Office as far as that aspect goes is still available here. And then here on the left-hand side, you can see how we broke down that same hierarchy by utility division, facility area, so on and so forth. And then Evansville also has a asset common name where they either enter in the name that they commonly use, something that means, asset name according to how they describe it, or just, whatever happens to be industry standard as well. They may add that in there if needed. And then once you get below that asset common name observation is where the actual inspection condition and things like that actually kick in. Okay, so I will go ahead and do our demonstration here. Right. So I may glance at my other screen occasionally. So I'm going to try not to, but there it goes. It's just going to happen anyway. So I'm going to just sign in here. And what I'll do is show you an inspection actual template that we've created first, and then get into some of the designer aspects as well. Okay. All right, so here's one of the treatment plant inspections. And this one is for, I think it said fluoride, yep, fluoride building. So you can see how we've used the panels to kind of create like a nice little folder structure, more or less. Everything's kind of grouped based upon similar components. And we have this inspectors panel because more than one person may actually be on an inspection at a time. And they may be sharing a tablet, and we still want to be able to capture when that happens. So the inspected by field will only capture one person at a time, but we do still want to know if there are two people who that other person was. So we have that configured there. And then here for air handlers, so these top text here are essentially observations that we configured without any predefined answers. So it's just basically, it's just the observation text, but no answers at all configured. So it just kind of shows up as an instruction, more or less. It's like a bullet point almost. Since there's nothing to answer, it's easy to just kind of keep on scrolling down. And then this separation here is also an observation, but just a blank observation. I couldn't get the observation to add without any spaces or punctuation or anything, so I did have to just hit space just to get the observation to add blank, but it's just to create some separation here between the text. So at the top, you have your safety precautions that need to be taken. And then here you have your checklist. This is your instructions for what needs to be done. And then here, you get into the actual inspection portion of the air handler component. And we just went with acceptable, unacceptable, or adjustment made, just to capture those situations where there may have been some minor little tweak, but it's not anything that's worth having a work order for. So we can just say, hey, yeah, something little happened here and it's good now, but it doesn't really warrant a work order per se. And then we have this general comments field at the bottom, just for whatever additional comments that they want to add. And we decided to do it this way so that the comments are a little easier to organize, and we don't have all of the comments for all the components at the end of the inspection. This gives it a little more context when we know which component that comment is for. Okay. And then I'll go over here to designer and kind of show you what that looks like there.
And while Jess is pulling that up, just to add a little bit more real world depth to the reason why we set the templates up the way that we did, we went very location based rather than equipment or process based. And so that fluoride building template Jess was just showing, there's air handlers, there's pumps, there's all different types of equipment that take different sorts of maintenance activities, but they're all in the same location. And so one single maintenance worker can take the iPad and complete that entire inspection without having to go across the entire plant multiple times. Whereas if we would have set up a template for air handler inspections, they would have had to go to each individual building and area in the plant that had an air handler before they could close out that inspection. So the way we set this up was really in accordance with the way that the maintenance crew did their work. And we didn't want to change their process. We wanted to come alongside them in the process that they had already identified as working the best.
Yep, and that's a really good point too. Setting it up based on location instead of process also more aligns with the GIS as well. So the guys will be selecting the building that they're working on and associating that to the inspection as well. And this just kind of just aligns better with that process.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So next I'll go over the branching inspection. Okay. So you can see just right away how a branching inspection just looks a bit different than your regular linear inspection. It's going to present you one observation at a time. And like we said, it's going to determine the next observation that you see based off of what you've selected. So here in the beginning, I've only got one option to select from. But now that I've gotten to something with more than one option, once I hit next question, I'm going to be presented with water-related options. So here I'll just kind of step through this. So we'll do booster station. And let's go ahead and do Killian pump station. And we'll do facility support. And let's do this one. So some of these, like in the case of Killian, that has facility support as well as some pumps aspect, we could have kept the observations more general to just the Killian station and included those pumping and facility options all in the same, all together, instead of parsing them out the way we have here. But we decided not to, because that severely limits your opportunity for error. So we kept things very finite and have this tailored such that if I select facility support and process distribution, my available options will change even at that point. So you can get as fine or as high level as you want to with these. But the main thing I would definitely say needs to be at the front of your mind is the organizational paradigm that this is kept in on the back end.
Yeah.
So if I just step through this, I'll just say common name. And then we get into the actual condition assessment. Okay, so back here in Designer, if I go to that template, okay. So in order to build this so that it's as fine and eliminates as much error as possible, it requires a great deal of configuration. I'm going to try not to scroll too fast. I don't want to make anybody nauseous, but organization is definitely key here in keeping things straight. So what I found very beneficial was when it really starts to get into the nuts and bolts of the branch is kind of grouping things into little categories, essentially. So, and I decided to do this based upon the hierarchy. So I've got a little grouping for areas, I've got a little grouping for processes, and then the same for equipment group and the assets. And the finer we get here, the greater the number of observations. And, you know, when you're setting this up, it's an important thing to keep in mind, not just for the actual configuration stage of a branching inspection, but also for the longevity of the maintenance of that branch. Because if it's not you maintaining it forever, somebody else needs to be able to come in and understand your organizational paradigm. And not all branching inspections, of course, will be this in depth. I mean, you know, I've done quite a few that do get lengthy, but like I said, you do have the ability to kind of hone it in if you can, and if you find that you need to.
And the error that Jess is speaking of that we're trying to eliminate, you know, all of our vertical assets are organized in accordance with that hierarchy that she was explaining earlier. And so this branching inspection is set up to match And so that error, the potential for error, is if we don't fully build out this branching inspection. I could go out and fill out a condition assessment inspection on pump number 1 at Killian Pump Station. And my counterpart could go out and fill out a separate inspection on the same pump, but he might place it in a different place in the hierarchy if we don't have this branching inspection fully built out, as kind of the pick your story example that Jess was speaking about earlier. So we want to make sure and we keep our assets organized very clearly so that we don't accidentally fill out duplicate inspections on the same asset, but have them in different places within the asset hierarchy. And having them organized like that allows us to roll up those condition assessments and each level of the hierarchy so that we can manage risk scores, not just on an asset level, but we can roll that up to a process and to a facility and get an aggregate score and assessment from that standpoint as well.
Great. All right, and I think, yes, I think that's the right one. Okay. All right, Logan, so you want to go over next steps?
Yeah, so this was really our first trial run with building these, not just preventative maintenance inspections, but also the branching inspections. And Jess, if you want to go ahead and advance to the next slide. We started with kind of a test group being the mechanical maintenance division at the water treatment plant. And so we've got a few different areas that we can go out and grow from there. We can move to the electrical maintenance group and start building out a total maintenance program at the water plant. And so that's that expanded plant-centric workflow. We also have to build out the rest of the branching inspections for different asset types. So we've got our vertical assets separated to 4 essential buckets. We've got mechanical, electrical, HVAC, and structural. And so we started with mechanical, and so the remaining workflows to build out would be those other 3 asset types from a branching inspection perspective. Once we have that in place, then we can move forward with actually performing those condition scoring, weighting those mechanical inspections, electrical inspections on each individual vertical asset. At which point it's going to be necessary and a parallel effort to build out our vertical asset hierarchy and our vertical asset registry into the GIS. So here in Evansville, we're using the GIS as our system of record, our single source of truth. And so we want to make sure we have all of that asset information backed up to the GIS, and doing that from a vertical perspective is a little bit of a unique challenge. And so a parallel effort to the condition scoring and the branching inspections will be building out those vertical assets within the GIS, and kind of an overarching road ahead for the next year or two. Here in Evansville, we've been operating on a geometric network for the GIS, and we're currently partnering and working with Esri to move on to a utility network. And so that's kind of an overarching workflow that'll be tied into all of these as well. So thank you guys for joining in on us. Thank you for clicking our presentation. A little bit different this year, no live presentations, but thank you guys for participating in this one. My contact and Jess's contact information is listed there, and please feel free to reach out. I love building our professional networks, and if we can help you, you guys can help us, and we can kind of gain some ideas and inspirations along the way. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you guys. Really appreciate it. And like Logan said, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out, and enjoy the conference and be well.